Feels very appropriate to welcome 2026 with Taylor Swift. Any Swifties in the house? Yes. Hi, I'm a Swiftie. Welcome to 2026. It's a good song, by the way, New Year's Day. And we're going to be leaning into that today. We're going to be leaning into the threshold that New Year's 2026, saying goodbye to 2025, could bring. And what better way than to let the Queen herself welcome us in. You know, I always find it funny because in a lot of spaces, there's always like football in church, yeah? And I'm not like a big football person, and so one of my goals for 2025 is do the whole like Taylor Swift in church. Feels like I saw some smile, anyways. Just thought I would let you guys into, I don't really believe in resolutions, but that's just like a personal goal of mine. To, people are like, the Broncos are playing today, I'll just come up and be like, the new song, or like, did you watch the docu-series? Or like, hey, what about that wedding coming up? So, anyways. You guys, there's some Swifties up. This is good. Thank you this is not part of my notes. This is just raw Brooke this morning. So yes, my name is Brooke. I am the associate pastor here at Crossroads. Hey, thanks for coming and welcoming in this new year. I don't know if you're here because of New Year's resolutions and it sounded like a good idea, or if guilt brought you. I hope not. But happy that you are here. And 2025 has ended. It's kind of a weird, some people, we can do that, yes. I don't know if I'm feeling much better about how 2026 has started, as Ryan was up here and mentioning how fun the past few days have been. I leaned over to my wife and I was like, he's taking my message. That was it. The complexity of this new year. 2025 was a big year. And, there's like Spotify Wrapped, right? When you look at 2025, what music did you listen to? I always have the same 3 top artists. Can you guess the first? You guys know me so well. My second is Kelly Clarkson. And it's always disappointing to me when Taylor Swift overpowers Kelly Clarkson because we've been together. I called when she was on American Idol in like 2001. So it's just, And the third for me is an artist named Audrey Assad. Don't know if anybody knows who she is. Anyways. So I just feel like, there's all these end of the year reviews. Everybody on social media has been posting all the things that happened. And one thing that I have noticed is there's such like a complexity with them. As I read people's end of the year kind of what this year brought, I find that a lot of people have joy, maybe there was a baby, but then there's also a sadness because of, loss of sleep, I don't know, independence. Or there's fun and all these things that happen, but then there's also this complexity that I find in these end of year reviews of anger or loss. Or they're talking about all the growth and the maybe exciting breakthroughs, but then they're also recognizing the struggles maybe of 2024 that led to the growth of 2025. And there's kind of this balance, this both and space of what was and what is. And I just kind of want to take a second to honor what was. Because I think that sometimes, as we heard from the Queen Taylor herself, that New Year's can bring this idea of, hey, I want to be with you at midnight. I want to have the celebration, but I'm also going to be cleaning up bottles with you on New Year's Day. I'm also aware of the reality of what comes after it. There's all of this build up and build up and build up. You have Thanksgiving. Well, really, there's Halloween, but you have Thanksgiving that's building to the festivities and the Christmas tree and the Christmas lights, right? And you're feeling that, and then you get to Christmas itself, and you open up the presents, and then you're kind of lingering in this space of Christmas magic, and then New Year's comes, and then that's kind of it, right? I don't know for you, but I feel that drop of, my birthday's in a couple of weeks, so I guess I feel a little bit of the ooh, there's more to come. And then there's Valentine's Day, anyways. But, but there is that drop from the focus and the magic and Not only is there that drop, but I think sometimes we forget what we might still be carrying from the previous year. Just because we're writing 26 now instead of 25 doesn't mean that that went away. And one of the things that I was doing is I was thinking about this kind of space between honoring what was and looking forward to what is I Googled, a dangerous place to sometimes be, I Googled some of the top headlines of 2025. And so I just figured I would let you into the inspiration that I read of maybe like the 10, I don't know if we'll read all 10, let's be honest, they're not that fun. But some of the 10 kind of biggest things that happened last year that I know for me kind of was like this aha moment. Like, not only was I having my own lived experience of 2025, but there was also all of this noise around me of things that were happening and taking place that I had no power or say in, that I was also like absorbing. And so buckle your seatbelts, because we're gonna review just a few of them. Maybe you remember, maybe you don't, but on New Year's Day of 2025, we welcomed the year with a terrorist attack in New Orleans. I don't know if you guys remember, there was a man inspired by ISIS that drove his F-150 into a street on New Orleans and killed 14 people. Like, we welcomed New Year's with the reality of violence in the world. Like, that's how last year started, like New Year's Day. Ironically, this kind of New Year's period, it has some similarities of some violence, hasn't it? We also, a few days within New Year's of last year, was the big fires that were going on in California. The Palisade-Eaton fires, they started on January 7th. There was all those winds that swept through, destroyed 16,000 structures, tens of thousands of acres, 29 people died in the midst of all of these fires. There was loss and tragedy, and it was all over the nation. And there was also so much conflict in the midst of that was happening around just like climate change and, having national assistance and emergency to those spaces and not really seeing that. Of course, in January, President Trump was inaugurated for his second term, and was only the second U.S. president to kind of have these non-consecutive terms, and there was just a lot that happened very quickly. J.D. Vance was his vice president, and a lot of policies just began to change and change. Immigration was one of them, right? We saw an immigration crackdown that was really intense, with ICE agents just going into people's works and home and schools. And then, of course, what were they going to do with all of these people? They literally created detention centers like Alligator Alcatraz. This was all within maybe 4 weeks of 2025. So if you're maybe wondering, outside of your own lived experience, the complexity or maybe the heaviness of some of the feelings, there was a lot of things that were and still are going on. National Guard was deployed in cities, LA, Chicago, DC, Portland, to deter violent crime that was taking place, something we've really never seen before. And in November, just a few months ago, we saw 2 members of the National Guard were shot in DC. It just keeps coming. It just is these things that we had no power over. In June, a Minnesota lawmaker was killed violently in her home. State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband in Brooklyn Park. And then another state senator and his residents were injured, just an act of violence. We know then in September, Charlie Kirk was assassinated and all the complexities that brought. We know that the government shut down for the longest ever of 45 days. And not only did it shut down and impact almost 1 million federal employees that were working unpaid, but 42 million recipients of SNAP went without benefits, maybe some people in this very room. And it cost the US $11 billion in adjusted GDP from those 45 days. Don't worry, I only have 2 more. We'll move on. The Epstein files were released. Lots of criminal activities and complexities there. And we ended the year with the Bondi Beach Hanukkah massacre in Australia, where people were just celebrating a sacred space that should have been honored and protected. 16 people were died, one of which was a Holocaust survivor. These are just 10 of them. When I Googled, there was 25, so, I was merciful in the 10. But I don't read these things because I'm just trying to be like a negative Nancy. I'm not even reflecting on, I'm honestly trying to validate the complexity of this space. The complexity of holding to what was and the threshold of what can be. The reality is that you all have had your lived experiences of 2025, whatever that looked like. But there was also all of this stuff that was completely out of control, this struggle, this space that was also impacting us. And not to maybe burst your bubble, but 2025 offers kind of the same thing, that these things are going to happen. We've already seen them, right, over the last couple of days. And there is kind of a reason why for many people, New Year's, seeing the clock go from 11:59 to midnight to 12:01, seeing it go from 31 to January 1st, can bring sort of this anxious anticipation. Does anybody have any anxious anticipation of a new year? I know that I do. I know that 2025 was a really hard year for me, and that there's a lot of change that I know is ahead for me in 2026. And I hope that in the midst of this anxious anticipation, that there's still a space that you can allow for growth, for change, for newness. At New Year's is really a great opportunity to hold space for both. And so that's what we're going to do today. And we're going to hold space for both of struggle and growth at this threshold. And we're also going to connect it with the Christmas story because it is still Advent season, right? Yes? I know that it doesn't feel like it. We aren't singing Christmas songs anymore. But it is still the Advent season. And so I want us to take a moment to realize that this newness, this threshold before what was and what will be is not like a new thing. That the Advent story has that all throughout it. The children of Israel, before Jesus came, this Christ child, they were going through a lot. It's not like when Jesus came that they were feeling secure. The Romans had taken over. They didn't have much identity. They didn't have security. They were constantly reminded that the space that they were in was not their own. And then they somehow knew that the Savior was supposed to come. But I can just imagine for them that it didn't feel like that was near. That they knew these Old Testament promises of a Savior coming, and yet they kept looking around and seeing that the Romans were everywhere and that their identity was gone. And yet the promise of the Savior, it felt so delayed and maybe even impossible to them. And yet we see in Luke that in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent. We see that in the midst of Israel feeling so lost and overwhelmed by the craziness of their nation and the control and the power that was around them, that this angel was sent to Galilee to a virgin betrothed to Joseph in the house of David. And that the virgin's name was Mary. And behold, you will conceive in your womb, this angel said, and you will bear a son. Imagine how that felt for her. Imagine how in the midst of, there's supposed to be promise here, all we're feeling is struggle. What do you mean it's happening now? It said, he will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High, and the Lord God will give to him the throne of his father David. The Christmas story, this Advent story, let's just sit in it for one more second. Just like Ryan said, we're going to put a bow on it. We're going to set it aside. We're going to move into a series of change and other things. But let's just sit with it for one more moment. That this nativity story, it happened at a threshold for the people of God. It happened at a threshold between promise and fulfillment, between this longing for identity and some sort of answer, and between what had been and what was coming. It's not like the world looked ready for Jesus, and yet enter Christ child. What an overwhelming time in history. As I was sitting and just lingering and reading about kind of this space between Old Testament and New Testament, they kind of call it like the silent time in history, those 400 years. There was so much that was going on and so much that we don't even know. It was a time of division. It was a time of conflict, tension, and struggle. And yet this is when Jesus, this Christ child, arrived. We don't know anything about that, right? Tension, division, struggle. That's not a familiar space at all for us. Are you tired? Do you feel the effects of the division, the conflict of maybe not knowing, what am I going to wake up to today? I really felt that the other day. I was just getting ready, living my life, and my wife says, have you looked at the news today? I said, oh boy. Oh boy. The tension, the conflict. Speaking of the people of Israel at this time, you know, in Isaiah, there's a lot of prophetic talk. Prophetic talk is just kind of Old Testament kind of analogies of maybe speaking about what could come or what might be. And in Isaiah, it's talking about kind of this period of the promise of a Christ child. And it says, the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. This is Isaiah chapter 9, verses 2 and 6. It says, the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light, but they were walking in darkness. Those who dwell in a land of deep darkness, on them has light shone. A few verses later, it goes into that very familiar verse. For unto us a child is born. For unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Prince of Peace, Everlasting Father, Mighty God. Jesus was born into a world that looked nothing like ready. In fact, the very description that the Bible uses to describe what the people were experiencing before it says, for unto us a child is born, is darkness. They walked in darkness. And darkness here is not meant to be like abstract or poetic. It's very much an experienced darkness. The people who walked in darkness, a land who dwelt in deep darkness, political oppression, economic strain, erosion of national identity, and this sense that maybe God's promise isn't true. Maybe his promise feels really distant or delayed. You know, Isaiah doesn't say that they stood in darkness as if they were like looking at something. It says that they walked in it as if it was very experiential and around them. And for many people, before this Christ child came, it wasn't even necessarily a choice. It was the national identity. It was the national expectation. Just like the headlines that we just read, we can maybe close our eyes and try to get away from it, but the reality is that it's just in our midst. The darkness is going to be around. This struggle is going to be around. And yet, in the midst of that is where Jesus stepped in, is where Christ child stepped in, is where the promise of peace, the mighty God, the everlasting Father, at a time that didn't make sense, when the world didn't feel ready, when promise did not feel near. And he didn't just step into it and say, oh, look, it's messy. He stepped into the darkness and he brought light. He was light everywhere that he went. He challenged the division. He called attention to the conflict. He flipped those tables and said that this is enough. He leaned into the tension and the oppression that was taking place for so many people. And most importantly, he drew near to those who struggled. He drew near. The darkness, the tension, the conflict was not something to withdraw him. It was the complete opposite, that he drew near. And the thing that I want us to hold on to, especially as we think about this threshold between what was and what could be, the promise of struggle that maybe has even just been handed to us, is this promise of growth and the reality that when Jesus stepped into that space, that the world was never the same. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Prince of Peace, Princess of Peace, Everlasting Mother. This is our Jesus, and this is the one who looks at what was of 2025, that looks at your experience with 2025. If it was really great, that's awesome. There's no no shame, no guilt in saying, that was one of the best years of my life. But maybe it wasn't. This is our Jesus. And as we think about this, as we close out this Advent season, as we say goodbye to Christmas, as we say goodbye to the Advent season, to the 12 days of Christmas, to all of these things, as we maybe even go back to our normal lives tomorrow, right? Break is kind of coming to an end. Work, reality is just kind of right there. I want us to just set it there for one moment. We still have candles on the side of the auditorium. There still is an opportunity for us to create that space that acknowledges the power of the threshold of what was and what will be. And so I just want to invite you to stand at that threshold with me. We've been ending our time throughout this Advent series, which is kind of a moment to reflect. And so we're going to give you an opportunity for that right now. Again, maybe it was a breakthrough year. Maybe it was a year that just felt like continual heartbreak and pain. Maybe you reflect and you maybe just kind of feel indifference towards it, like that was a year. Maybe it wasn't necessarily bad. Maybe it wasn't necessarily good. And I don't know what 2025 has in store for us. I think something that I'm very aware of that 2025 does have in store for us, especially as a church, is change. You know, there's that old saying, that phrase, change is the only certainty, change in taxes, but we don't need to talk about the taxes part. We're not in tax season yet. That change is the only certainty. That change is this constant flow that we see in the universe. We look outside and we see it in seasons. We see it in our bodies as we age. We see it in life events, in news headlines. And that is one thing that 2026 has to offer us, is change. And as a church, we're going to experience some of that. I don't know how much longer we're going to be in this building or what our worship experience is going to be like. And that is one reason why our next series is going to be on change, to lean into the anxiety, the hope, the excitement, the anticipation of what change can be for us. And what does it mean for us as we walk this peacemaking path? What does it mean for us as we hold space for what was and as we embrace the newness of what is to come? And so let's just take a second together and pause. I want you to maybe take a few deep breaths, and I want you to just think for a second of 2025. And I want you to maybe think of one thing that happened in 2025. Maybe it was good, maybe it wasn't good. Maybe it's just a feeling, maybe it's a sight, a smell, a sound. And I just want you for a second to just think about, how does that feel to hold on to that thing from 2025? How does it feel in your body, in your mind? Is it something you want to hold on to as you move into 2026? Or is it something that as you think about it now, you want to release and let go of? Now I want you to take another breath, and I want you to think about now 2026. 25 was there, that experience was there. Let's stand in the space of looking forward at what could be. Do you feel hope? Do you feel anxiety? Fear? Excitement? I want you to just think about 2026, the newness, the opportunity for growth, change. And I want you to just hold that. This is not pressure this is not New Year's resolutions. I have to do exactly what I'm thinking of right now. This is no pressure. This is just meant to be a space of standing in the threshold of what was and what could be. You know, we have the candles today. And I hope that we can just remember that the world was not ready for the promise of Jesus. That there is no certain box that you need to be in for 2026 to be the year where the mighty God, the everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace is near. That there was, for the people of Israel, just chaos around them, and yet enter the Christ child. And that promise is available for you. That growth and that hope is ours that we can cling to. And so as we light these candles today, I hope that they can represent the growth that has come through struggle. 2025 was a struggle, and that's okay. And I hope that we can light them today and just create a space in this Advent season just one more time to allow that light to reveal, to refine, to renew, to hold on to what was, and to cling to what could be. So as the band comes up and sings with us, please stand and honor, stand in the threshold of what was and what could be.